So, okay, today on our podcast I have with me Councillor Colin Noble, who's the leader of the Suffolk County Council. Hello, Colin.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on today. Could you, in a really short way, tell us why 5 years ago you decided to mutualise quite a few services in Suffolk County Council? What drove you at the time, and what did you do?
Well, the journey really started in 2005 when we took control of the County Council. I, like a lot of other people, was watching, slightly aghast at some of the council tax increases that were coming out. The council tax was put up 11.9 in 1 year and 18.5 in the other, the next. And we sort of felt, well, that can't quite be right. So we managed to take power, and I suppose, like myself, a lot of the people on the Conservative side, tend to be business people, tend to be people who, in their business life, sort of look at the bottom line. And really and truly, there was an organisation that hadn't changed a lot over a number of years. A lot of embedded things, so HR was embedded, some of the IT was embedded, some of the finance was in the different departments, and you had daft situations where one department was going and hiring buildings and the other department was vacating buildings, and so it was a little disjointed. So the idea first of all was to create a central services, have a look at how you could make it more efficient by doing that. And then I think slowly it started to be about, well, how do we make this whole thing more efficient? And one of the things I think you find in local government is, because it isn't profit-based, it tends to be that when you look at a figure, and it's a sort of little thing, you tend to press it quite hard, and it moves, and it starts scrolling up and down as you press on it. And I think a lot of us felt that business is all about the bottom line. Business is all about understanding your profit, understanding what your costs are, and making sure that you charge more for the widget that it costs you to manufacture. And local government's very different from that. But understanding your costs is really important. I suppose also we come from a place of lower taxes, smaller government, and tends to be. We're also, most of us, entrepreneurs. We're people who like to see businesses start, we like people being their own boss. And I suppose that's sort of really the bedrock of some of the things we started to look at.
So tell us about the Suffolk Library story, because that's Suffolk Library. Suffolk's now got a mutual that delivers its library service. How did that all come to pass?
Well, I suppose when the comprehensive spending review came out, I think local government woke up to the fact there was going to be a lot less money. I, like many people, had stood behind a brand new mobile library building that's going to go out around the county and deliver a book service everywhere. And I suppose I've been to the refurbishment of this and the opening of that. And those are the days when there was a lot of money. As it turned out, not real money being spent. And I suppose the comprehensive spending review arrived, and we all realised we were going to have to make significant savings. So the library service is a fairly classic council mechanism. The backdrop is less people are using it, more people use Google and different search engines, and so actually we have thought about it and we thought, well, we have to reform this. It has to save money. How do we go about it? So we looked at a lot of different things that certainly got people quite animated. In my own village, there is a small library, about 400 people registered to use it, and about 150 were using it regularly. But 1,000 people signed the petition against its closure and Save Our Library. And so you had this strange situation that people wanted the library, just didn't use the library. So I called a public meeting, and 106 people were there, and it was really a question of, do we sack him now or do we take him out of the ballot box? And I suppose what I challenged in the room was, well, okay, if you want to save the library, how are we going to do this? And I asked for people to come forward to form a sort of community group. And at the time we were looking at lots of proposals, potentially going down to 7 libraries. Could we keep them all open? How could we spend less money? And I think also with the staff, I think it was a moment where they were saying, well, this isn't possible, we can't do this.
How much were you spending at the time? Was it 10 million a year on libraries?
I don't think it was quite that much, but what we did do is we knew we wanted to take 30% out of the cost.
Out of the budget.
So if it's 10, that would be something like £3 million we want to take it out of the base. So what we did was we sat down with our library staff and we talked about it. And what we eventually came up was an industrial provenance society where our library staff would transfer into it, the senior management would transfer into it, and different libraries would have different solutions. So in my own, there was a friends group, and they would work with the library service.
That's in your little village in West Suffolk, yeah?
Little village in West Suffolk, 6 or 8 people, they've got a blog site, and they've involved an author. And what they've done is, in a way in which they never did when it was an in-house service, they've been able to work with the Independent Industrial Provenance Society and actually go out there and get more engagement for it. So now there are more people using it than ever before. When we have our village fete, they have a tent and they bring a sort of library service. So it's much more in the community than it was when it was an in-house service. And what the Industrial Provenance Society have been able to do is they've been able to take out that 30% of the costs. All the libraries are still open. There are more people borrowing books than there ever was before, and they've expanded the service provision. And the very same staff who were really struggling to think how they could take any money out of the service are now running their own business, running their own mutual, and are delivering that library service for us today.
Yeah, it's just an amazing story, isn't it? You're taking out a third of the budget, and they're doing more, they're delivering more, and people who couldn't see how that would happen are now making it happen. And you've applied that to other services as well, haven't you, in the council? What else have you done in Suffolk that's similar to that?
Well, I was in the cabinet member for adult social services, and I felt for a long, long time that this was very much something we wanted to do. So in adult social services, we effectively floated out Sensitive Change, which was the hearing and sight loss service, and today that they're running their own business. There are a lot of things we're doing with them at the moment. That one hasn't been quite as successful as we want it to be, so we're currently about to make them a wholly owned company to try and take them through the next phases. Other services, such as the employment for people with learning disabilities, that's now Realise Futures, and that's growing from strength to strength, and it's involved in other places delivering services as well. Leading Lives is another one which is dealing and supporting people to live their lives in their own homes and in their community. So it was really looking at adult social services and what we could realistically float out to run their own businesses. We've done some other stuff as well. We've got a couple of wholly owned. We've got something called Concerters, which was the former in-house architects and designers. They now run their own company. And we've got something called EFMS, Eastern Facility Management Services, which are about to change their name.
Yes.
It's a bit of a mouthful, that
one.
It is a mouthful. And they're out there now bidding for contracts to run FM for a whole range of different organisations, and they've just returned their first profit back into the council. So there's some, I think, where it's about mutuals, where I think it's about setting up staff organisations that go out and run their own businesses, grow the business, change the business based on what the residents actually need. And there are some that are profit-making companies that if they can go out there and win business, they can actually return the dividend to the county council as well.
So if other councils are listening to this, and they might be, that haven't done any of this stuff in mutualisation or divestment, what's your core message to a council, a Tory council, but any council, about why this is better than what might the alternatives be?
Well, I don't think this is political ethos. I don't think this is dogma. What it's about is looking at the different services you provide and thinking about the best way of doing them. So sometimes it's in-house. You can continue traditionally delivering the service in-house. Sometimes it's about creating a wholly owned company that goes out there and trades, that behaves as a company, but you happen to be the shareholders. And sometimes it's about creating things like the Industrial Provenance Society to run the libraries, or a mutual to actually go out there and run their own business, and literally just hand the business over to them, but still contract them back into the organisation. So it's really not one size fits all. It's really about thinking about what you want to achieve, what your residents value, the capabilities of your staff as well. That's a big factor in this, looking at those that are going to be suitable for this, those that are not, because some are and some aren't. And really just probably having quite a mixed economy. But I think what it's fundamentally about is, one, letting your staff fly, so that they can actually go out there and do the things, perhaps without some of the controls and sort of add-ons that seem to always be around public service delivery vehicles, i.e. councils.
Yes.
And sometimes it's about finding those things that can make profit and realising that actually they still need to be a company, however wholly owned, rather than a department, because it changes the nature of the business.
Yeah.
But I think it's also around understanding your costs better. For me, a lot of this is around, it creates a purity. So some organisations, some councils really go just down the procurement, they go out to the tender process, they literally just go to the market to contract it back in. Yes, you understand your costs in that way, but I think it's also about the sort of environment you want to create. So in Suffolk, it's been very much about creating businesses in Suffolk, because then the people work in Suffolk, they spend their money in Suffolk, and it's about, when you think about the footprint of a county council, so that when you are actually, instead of being a pure service delivery, perhaps a slightly old-fashioned model now, you still are involved in your community because those businesses are involved in your community, those mutuals are involved in your community. And I think that's a terribly important aspect about how you spend public money within your space.
Yeah.
It isn't just about the cheapest price, it isn't just about the bottom line, it is about thinking about how you move through your community.
And on that, some of the businesses you've set up have been wholly owned, some have been mutuals. What made you set up the mutuals as mutuals rather than wholly owned in those particular cases? What was it about those services that attracted you to the mutual model in preference to wholly owned, which you'd also done for some of your others? What was the thinking there?
I think it's really about the potential to make profit. I suspect that when we look at the wholly owns, the idea is that they return a dividend.
Right.
And that's why it's a wholly owned company, and we look for its board of directors to be business people, to be professional in that respect. Whereas I think with the mutuals, it's more about organisations that are probably always going to contract into the county council because they're about spending public money in our communities to support people that need supporting. But I think what they do also do is that they can be closer to their customers, closer to the residents than perhaps a county council can, and deliver a service that changes in a way in which sometimes it doesn't with a county council.
Yeah, and obviously Suffolk's gained a reputation for its divestment, for its mutualisation, for being very go ahead in that way. What of the future for Suffolk now that you've done all of this? How are you looking at the remainder of your services in the future? What's the thinking?
Well, I think we've done some of this, and I think the reality of it is there's a lot more that could be done. There's lots of other services that the county still delivers. I think when we look at devolution, which is the current agenda at the moment, and looking at the way in which we work differently across a two-tier area, there are perhaps a lot of services that are delivered in pockets at the moment that could become something that is delivered in a pan-Suffolk way, that then the district and boroughs have control of, and so that they actually shape more at a local level, but there are economies in scale. And some of those would be wholly owned, and some of those potentially would be mutuals as well. So I think there's another phase coming, and we're really excited about that. I'm really keen to see that be successful, because what we've found so far, I think, with our wholly owns and with our mutuals, some are doing better than others. And I think that the trick and the key to this is to unlock, well, why are some doing better than others? Why have some really grasped this agenda, and perhaps some of the others have struggled a little with that, and create an environment where it's safe to do it, where people can see what's gone before, and people within the organisation can take up that challenge and be supported about how they go about this thing. But for some of them, it's quite a scary moment, from being in local government to actually running your own organisation. But we think it empowers people, and we think that when you do it, you get that better result than just having a traditional in-house service.
Because do you always need a superstar to lead a mutual? Do you think that's that because we know some of the same people, and if you could reel them off, and they're all within their own rights, they're outstanding people who've led their services out, and they're doing great things now. Do you always need that superstar, or can this be done in other ways, do you think?
Well, you need a team. Whether you need one superstar or whether I think you need a team, because at the end of the day, one superstar, if you use a football analogy, it doesn't make a team. A team makes a team. And I think you've got to put the right people around them, put the right regime in place to help them and support them. And then I think that's what makes it work. So when I look round at what is working well and what perhaps could work better. Sometimes there are the odd superstars, but actually it's about the team of people that are doing it, and that's really the bit that we want to nurture, the bit that we want to take forward. And you may find that as you do some of these things, the people need to change. That we've seen that as well, that actually people who started some of these things are not necessarily the right people to take to
Finish the job.
But the main thing is that once they've created the mutual, created the wholly owned, they're making those decisions, not county councillors, not council officers, and we are working with them as to how we deliver that service, but they're running their own organisation.
So if we look at, we're now in 2015, we wind forward 5 years. What do you see as the primary business of the council in 5 years' time? Assuming that you divest more, you create some more successful businesses doing more things. What role does that put the council in? Do you see in 5 years? How does that all look?
Well, I think you're always the holder of the public purse.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fundamental point. You hold the public purse, and that isn't just about spending money, that's about the environment you create, about how does it look, how does it feel. I see it as a mixed economy. I see some things will continue to be delivered directly. I think some things will be delivered through mutuals, some from wholly owned. But what I want to see is a lot more efficiency. People say to me, local government has been on an efficiency drive for 10 years, it's as efficient as you can be. I think when you talk to business people, they'll say, well, that's not true. In reality, it can be a lot more efficient than it is, and that's what we've got to work towards, because there is less money, and over the next 5 years, the Chancellor has already in his budget, and certainly in the comprehensive spending review, will lay out the fact that there is no more money, because yes, the economy is doing a little bit better, and I think we've just seen a budget that delivers on the promises that were made when they came in. But underlying that, this country is still not in a position where it is taking in more than it spends. And until we get back to that, I think local government has to accept that it's going to have to play its part. There's lots of challenges in that, there's lots of risk in that, and we work very closely with government so they understand what we're about and how we operate. But I think you have to accept the environment for the next 5 years is that there isn't going to be more money. So it's about being as efficient as you can be, designing your services to be as close to residents as they can possibly be, understanding what residents value and what they don't value, so that quite frankly you stop doing some of the things that are irrelevant and you focus on the things that are incredibly important to people. And that's, I think in 5 years' time, the central councils, I think you're going to see them smaller, I think they're going to be leaner. I think there's going to be more mutuals, more wholly owned companies, and that's certainly how we want to see it in Suffolk.
Intriguingly, where does the private sector fit into this? In terms, because obviously some councils will be probably just signing very big cheques to very large companies to come and take their problems away. That's not part of your narrative, I've noticed. And is that for a particular reason, or do you envisage also a large role for large private companies in this change? How do you see that all panning out?
Well, for me, it's about empowering our staff. For me, it is about how we go about creating a Suffolk system. I really don't see that being a purist procurement exercise where you put it to the market, big companies come along and say what they're going to do. I'm very much about growing businesses, very much about empowering staff, very much about seeing a mixed economy. I think one of the factors that isn't particularly explored by councils is risk, and sometimes when you do these things, they don't work. For a variety of reasons, they don't work. And I think when you have a plurality in your marketplace, that there are lots of providers doing lots of different things, lots of your former staff doing lots of different things, I think if there is risk, if there is potential failure within that, then that can be absorbed within the system. Risk is something that most politicians are very risk averse, because generally speaking, people will dig it up and use it against you forever and a day, and that's the fact of life.
It was a political sort of cabbage to throw.
It does. It certainly does, and we're well aware of that. But I think in reality, I think not to take risk means that what you're going to do is salami slice your services to the point where you're delivering next to nothing and actually not satisfying anybody. And I think the real challenge over this what will be a 10-year period of constriction for local government is not to salami slice politics. It is not to just sort of be in the middle of the pack. It's to try and come up with new ways of doing things, to drive forward how you would like to see things happen, and take a little bit of risk along the way, because that is a factor in all of this. You design it very carefully, you work with the staff, you support them as best you can, but not everything is always going to work, and that's a fact of life that you have to live with.
And how does it feel as you know? How does it feel leading this change? Because you've got to lead as a leader of council, you've got to lead staff, communities, and also your group within the council. How does it all feel faced with the kind of challenges that we've got at the moment? How do you feel about it all?
I think for me it's a lot about communication. I think the vision itself is not that complicated, to be perfectly honest. I think the notion of a smaller council, of more staff groups doing things for themselves, of creating a marketplace, this is not particularly rocket science. The challenge is, how do you communicate that, both internally, so that people understand within the organisation what you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it, with those staff groups that want to flow out, how you communicate with them and support them. But I think it's fundamentally with the public, and the public, I think, divide into sort of 2 or 3 different groups. People pay their council tax. There are universal services, so people want to see the potholes repaired. They want to see the bins emptied regularly. These are your universal services. But then you have another cohort of people who rely on those services. You know, from protecting younger people from those very discreet things where if somebody's coming in and they're not washed or they're hungry at school, what does that mean? Starting to think about troubled families, to delivery of services for older people. You know, there are a lot of people in any county who actually won't be able to get out of bed unless you provide the services that sends people in to help them get out of bed. Really serious stuff out there that you're involved in. And it's how you communicate to people that we value and protect this. We don't particularly value that because of these reasons. And understanding what people want to do. So for me in Suffolk, we've relaunched something called We Are Listening. Partly that's about me going out on a Saturday morning with some of the staff and into marketplace and talking to people. It's about how we drive up our focus group work. So we have something called the Suffolk 1000. I want that to become the Suffolk 10,000. So people regularly interact with us, and so that we get past the point of, I think there's a little bit of jaundice creeps in. I think everybody thinks councils, well, they only ever consult when they've made up their minds. And I think I want to get us to a place where people understand that we are genuinely asking, we're genuinely valuing what people are saying to us, and it affects the way in which we make decisions on behalf of people. And I think that's that communication point, so that when we make a decision, when we do something, people have understood why we've done it, they've understood the background to why we've done it, and so that we've made difficult decisions, because a lot of these are really difficult decisions, quite easy just to salami slice and do a little less each time, and we've made those bold decisions because we've talked to people, we've listened to people, and we've explained to people the reasons we are doing what we do.
Yeah, and so you know, obviously, as a former politician myself, you have to go to people after a certain amount of time with a proposition, which is, you know, which people will either like or respect or not like. And in terms of how you're developing your council and your role in it, what do you see as your core proposition to people, to communities, in you know, at the end of what's going to be quite a difficult few years for councils generally? What is the proposition coming out of everything you've said as a message to the ordinary man or woman in the street, or even the ordinary staff member? What's this all add to us as an offer, do you think?
I think first of all it's that we are listening. I think that's fundamentally important, that people sense that we are genuinely talking to them about what we're doing. I think it's about a smaller council. I think it's about less direct employment of people, and I think it's about offering the best possible value for money that we can to people. It's about delivering the services which they value and they want to see, rather than the ones that officers or us think are terribly important, and making sure that at a very local level we've tailored things to their particular circumstance. One of the things that always fascinates me about local government is that the more local you can design a service, the better it fits. So in some communities, there's next to nothing going on, and you wonder, well, why isn't there a good neighbours scheme? Why isn't there a lunch club? Why isn't other places, for no apparent reason, it takes you days just to read through the websites with all the different groups that are out there, and the way in which the community stitches together. And I think for a very long time, what local government has tended to do is sort of just come into a community. Well, if you just wait there, please, because I've got a clipboard. I'm obviously a professional, and this is what you need. Now, what we've done is we've got a strategy called Supporting Lives, Connecting Communities. It ties in, I sit for the LGA on the Think Local Act Personal National Programme Board, and I lead for local government on something called Building Community Capacity, which is a national scheme which looks remarkably close to the thing I introduced a few years ago in Suffolk called Supporting Lives, Connecting Communities. And it's really about going into a community, understanding what goes on now, and how you replicate that, build it, fill the voids, rather than just simply step in and take over. So I hope what we'll see over the next few years is a council, a series of councils, whether it be the district or whether it be the county council, a series of councils really understanding communities in a different way to perhaps they've done in the past. So that we do spend less money, because that's partly what this is about, but we actually spend that money more wisely in communities in the way in which we support those communities.
It's been a fascinating interview. Thank you very, very much for coming in to talk to us today, and we'll call things to a close there. Thank you, Councillor Colin, Leader of Suffolk County Council.
Thank you, Craig.